The night it all collapsed. I wore the navy suit Marin liked best, charcoal stitching, subtle but sharp. She'd ironed my shirt herself that morning, humming something I didn't recognize. I'd taken it as a good sign. She hadn't touched me in days, hadn't laughed at my jokes in weeks. But she touched that shirt. I clung to that as meaning something. That's how pathetic I was, reading affection into creases. The gala was held at the Silvermore Hotel downtown, marble floors slick with polish and laughter that always felt a bit too rehearsed. It was Jasper's night, my younger brother, the firm's new golden boy. He just secured the Whitlock merger, something Dad had chased for years. Everyone said he was brilliant, charming, the future of Ellison and Hale. My name, our name, carved into glass, and somehow I felt like I was standing outside of it, looking in. Marin looked radiant, of course. She always did. Soft silver dress, hair swept into an effortless knot, those pale blue earrings I bought her on our 5th anniversary. She still wore them. I wish I hadn't noticed. I wish I hadn't cared. I played the role. I smiled. I shook hands. I nodded when they toasted Jasper. He gave a speech that made half the room weep. I clapped. Not too loud. Just enough to keep the performance going. And then the lights dimmed, and they said there'd be a surprise. A slideshow. Memories of the journey. Clients. Deals. Family. Legacy, someone whispered near the bar. The screen flickered to life. Soft piano music played. The first photos were harmless. Young Jasper, wide grin in college. The office when it was just 4 of us. Dad with his arm around us both, looking proud and tired. Then came vacation photos, trips I wasn't on. I started noticing that. Jasper and Marin laughing on a boat I never boarded. At a winery I'd never visited. She never drank wine, I remembered. Said it gave her headaches. But there she was, swirling a glass in her hand, flush in the cheeks, leaning close to him. It felt like someone else's life, projected on a wall for everyone to admire. And then it came. The photo that changed everything. There was a beach, sunset orange and soft. My wife stood barefoot in a sundress I'd never seen before, hair wind-tossed, face tilted up. Her smile was gentle, content, the kind of smile she used to give me when we first met. But it wasn't me she was smiling at. It was Jasper, his arm wrapped tightly around her waist, his face bent down, lips pressed to her forehead like she belonged to him. The room went so quiet I could hear the clink of a single champagne flute being set down behind me. The music kept playing, some orchestral swell that felt like mockery. My chest tightened, not with rage, but something colder, deeper, a sinking that started in my stomach and swallowed everything whole. I didn't move, not at first. My eyes flicked toward Marin, just once. She was 3 feet from me, frozen. Her mouth parted slightly, like she was about to say something, but didn't. Maybe couldn't. I thought I'd scream. Thought I'd grab the mic and tear the night apart. But instead, I just left. I turned, walked past the tables, the shocked faces, the waiters frozen mid-step. I didn't run. I didn't slam the doors. I just walked, like I was stepping out of a burning building before anyone realized it was on fire. Outside, the air hit me like a wave. Cool, cruel, honest. I heard footsteps behind me, but I didn't turn around. A voice, hers, called out, "Daniel, wait, please." I kept walking. I didn't even know where I was going. The car was parked 3 blocks down. I unlocked it, got in, and sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. The radio clicked on, some soft jazz station she liked, and I turned it off instantly. My fingers trembled, but my face stayed still. I wasn't crying. I wasn't yelling. I was just done. The drive home was a blur. I remember the red lights, the passing headlights slicing through my windows like accusations. When I pulled into our driveway, I didn't go inside. I couldn't. I sat there in the dark for nearly an hour. Eventually, I drove to a diner on the edge of town, the kind that never closes and doesn't ask questions. I ordered black coffee. The waitress had pink hair and a lip ring. She asked if I wanted cream. I said no. She nodded and walked away like I was just another late-night ghost. Maybe I was. At some point, I texted my assistant to say I wouldn't be coming in for a few days. No explanation. No need. I knew the gossip would spread fast enough. I left my phone screen facing down. Didn't want to see her name light up. Didn't want to hear the vibrations that might trick me into hope. I stared at my reflection in the window, tired eyes, jaw clenched, tie loosened. I looked like someone who'd just lost a life, not a person, not a husband. When the coffee went cold, I drove again. Not home. Not to a hotel. I ended up parked outside the church we got married in. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd feel something. But there was nothing. No warmth. No divine sign. Just bricks and silence and memories I wanted to torch. I stared up at the bell tower and thought about the vows we wrote. Her trembling voice. My stupid grin. I remember promising her a life full of laughter and forgiveness. But I never promised to stay after betrayal. That wasn't part of the deal. By morning, I knew I wouldn't go back. Not for clothes. Not for closure. I'd figure it all out later. Lawyers, papers, division of property. Right now, I just needed air. Space. Silence. I left my wedding ring on the dashboard. Didn't even watch it roll as I drove away. Just kept going, chasing nothing, leaving everything. It's strange, the things your body does when your heart breaks. You don't scream. You don't sob like the movies say you should. You go quiet. Too quiet. I remember coming home the morning after the gala, if I could still call it home. The sun hadn't risen yet. The house looked the same, but everything inside it had shifted. The framed photos on the entryway table, the keys on the hook by the door, the faint smell of Marin's jasmine conditioner in the hallway. None of it felt real anymore. It was like walking through a stage set I used to belong in. Marin wasn't home. Or if she was asleep and pretending not to hear me come in. I didn't care. I didn't go to the bedroom. I went to the guest room and sat on the floor with my back against the wall, staring at the blank space where a painting used to hang before we decided it clashed with the palette. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I opened my laptop and placed an order for a hidden security camera. I don't even know why. Maybe it was the part of me that still needed proof, not just for court or records or whatever practical reason. No, it was for me. For the part of me that still couldn't believe it unless I saw it with my own eyes. The camera arrived 2 days later. Small, discreet, nestled inside a faux smoke detector. I installed it in our bedroom ceiling, just above the closet. Marin was in the shower when I did it. Timing it was easy. She always played music, something soft and acoustic, which masked the sound of me dragging the stepladder from the garage. I worked quietly, efficiently, the way I had when I built the bed frame with my own hands years ago. I ran my fingers along that same wood before stepping down. I used to believe this room was sacred. Now I just wanted the truth. The camera linked to my phone. I didn't check it constantly. I let it run for 4 days. I barely slept. I stayed away most nights. Pretended to work late. Crashed in my car twice. Ate fast food I couldn't taste. And on the 5th night, it happened. The footage came through at 9:43 p.m. A notification on my screen while I sat in a 24-hour laundromat, staring at a dryer spinning someone else's clothes. I watched it right there, in that plastic orange chair that creaked every time I shifted. First came the sound. The bedroom door creaking open. Then footsteps. 2 sets. Laughter, his laugh, unmistakable. I'd heard it since I was a kid. And then her voice. Marin. Soft. Flirty. Familiar in a way that didn't belong to me anymore. I watched her unbutton her blouse like she'd done it for him 100 times. Maybe she had. She didn't look nervous. She looked at home. Comfortable. She peeled off her blouse and tossed it on the chair in the corner, the one I sat in while reading her poetry when she was sick. Jasper pulled her in like she was his. Like she had always been his. They didn't even hesitate. They used our bed, the one I built, the one I prayed beside when we were trying for a baby, the one where she once cried into my chest after her father's funeral. And now she let my brother trace the length of her back like she was a prize he'd finally claimed. I sat through the entire recording. Every minute of it. No fast forward. No rewind. I watched it the way you watch a fire burn down the house you grew up in, shocked but unable to look away. When it ended, I didn't delete it. I just let the phone fall into my lap. My jaw was clenched so hard I could feel the tension in my ears. My hands didn't tremble. My heart didn't race. It was worse than that. I was completely calm. And in that calm, something broke. I went home that night. Took the long way. Rolled the windows down. Let the cold wind slap me awake. When I walked through the door, Marin was already home. She was in the kitchen, hair damp, barefoot, wearing that green robe I gave her for our 3rd anniversary. I remember thinking how easy she looked in it, like someone who had nothing to hide. The air smelled faintly of rosemary. She was stirring something on the stove. Hey, she said, not turning. I made soup. You want some? I stepped beside her. Looked at the pot. It was tomato bisque, her favorite. I never liked it much. Too sweet. But I nodded anyway. Yeah, soup sounds great. She smiled at me then. The kind of smile I used to chase for days. And I smiled back. Not because I felt anything, but because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd shattered me. I wanted her to think everything was fine. I wanted her to believe the mask I wore was real. So I sat down at the table, ate slowly, complimented the seasoning. She looked relieved. She reached across the table at one point, touched my hand. And I didn't flinch. The next morning, I called my lawyer. His name was Lionel Deeks, old school, no nonsense, and surgical in his approach. I sent him the footage. I remember the pause in his voice after he watched it. Do you want to press charges? He asked. I said no. You want to go public? I said no again. You want to destroy them? I looked out the window at the sunrise and said, I just want to leave. By noon, the paperwork was ready. Divorce with cause. Irreconcilable betrayal. Infidelity. Family compromise. Lionel handled the filings. I left the house the next day. Didn't slam the door. Didn't leave a note. I took my clothes, my guitar, and the copy of Leaves of Grass Marin never touched, but always claimed to love. I didn't take the wedding album, or the ring box, or anything she could use to tether me emotionally. And I never told her I knew. Not once. Not to her face. I let her wonder. I let her guess. I gave her silence. My final, perfect revenge. I didn't call ahead. I just showed up at my parents' house the day after I filed the papers. The weather had turned, gray skies pressing low like a lid on everything. I parked on the curb like a stranger, not in the driveway where I used to toss my bike, where Marin and I once stood during Christmas Eve snowfall, laughing over spilled eggnog. My mother opened the door wearing a pearl-button cardigan, makeup already set, hair in that tight, no-nonsense twist that always told me she'd been expecting something, but not me, and certainly not this. She didn't hug me, just stepped back and let me in like I was a distant guest visiting out of politeness. The house still smelled like citrus floor polish and something baking. Always too perfect, too post. My father was in the living room, the fireplace crackling on low despite the heat in the air. He glanced up from his paper and gave me that half nod. Daniel. I didn't sit. Didn't take off my coat. I stood in the entryway like the house might spit me out if I crossed too far in. My voice was even when I spoke. I'm divorcing Marin. My mother's eyebrows lifted. Not in surprise, just calculation. You sure? I found out about her and Jasper. A pause. 1 second. Maybe 2. That's all they gave me. Then my father folded his paper and sighed through his nose. Family is complicated. Complicated. That's what he called it. Not betrayal. Not filth. Not the unraveling of everything I'd ever known. Just complicated. Mom, I said slowly, turning to her. He slept with my wife. She touched the gold chain at her neck, the one she always fidgeted with when uncomfortable. Daniel, don't make this worse than it has to be. Worse. I could feel the calm cracking. You think I'm the problem? No one's saying that. My father muttered, already standing, already tired of the conversation. We just think maybe it's something you two could talk through. All 3 of you. Talk through. Like we were roommates who'd argued over dishes. Like it wasn't my brother sleeping with the woman I once thought I'd die beside. Let me be clear, I said, swallowing hard. I'm not just leaving Marin. I'm done with Jasper. And I'm done with anyone who thinks this is just a misunderstanding. My mother stepped forward then, her voice tight with restraint. He's your brother. No, I said. He was. There was silence. Just the low crackle of the fire and the distant tick of the antique clock in the hall. For the first time in my life, I saw them clearly, not as parents, not as family, but as people who'd drawn lines I hadn't noticed until I was bleeding on the wrong side of them. People who loved the illusion of harmony more than the truth. I came here, I said, not to ask for help or sympathy. Just to say goodbye. I turned and walked out before they could respond. I didn't want to hear the weak justifications, the empty pleas. I didn't need anything from them anymore. That night, I packed the last of my things from the apartment Marin and I had shared. I didn't bother with the big stuff. The couch, the dishes, the wedding china we never used. Let her keep it all. Let her sit among the ruins and call it a home. I moved into a loft above a second-hand furniture store in Briarton, a town no one in my family ever spoke of unless it was to joke about bad coffee or potholes. I liked it for that reason. No one would follow me there. No one would recognize me. I paid 3 months in cash. The place was a mess when I got the keys. Cracked windows. Dusty floorboards. But it had one big skylight and silence. That was enough. For a week, I slept on the floor. I had a sleeping bag and a second-hand lamp I bought from the shop below. I ordered takeout I barely touched. I walked for hours each day just to feel the ache in my legs, like punishment or proof I still existed. And then, on the seventh day, I walked past a rescue shelter. A mud in the window caught my eye, big ears, wiry coat, eyes full of that same kind of tired I saw in the mirror. I went in, filled out the form, and walked out with him on a frayed red leash. They said his name was Buckley. I renamed him Chance, because that's what I was giving myself. A chance to start over. A chance to live without pretending. A chance to breathe without wondering what part of my life someone else was using behind my back. The first night Chance slept curled against me like he'd always been there. No judgment. No questions. Just quiet companionship. I bought a desk the next week. Nothing fancy. Just a flat surface and sturdy legs. I placed it near the skylight. I opened my old notebooks, the ones I hadn't touched in years. I used to write short pieces, essays, the occasional poem. Marin said it was a waste of time, that I should focus on billable hours. I had listened. I always listened. But now, I wrote for hours. I wrote everything I'd never said. The things I kept hidden in my throat while my world burned down. I didn't miss them. My parents. My brother. Not really. I missed the idea of what they could have been. The fantasy I carried around like a shield. But the real versions, the ones who stood silent in the face of betrayal, I left them where they belonged. Behind. One afternoon, as the rain tapped lightly on the roof, I looked around the loft, bare walls, scratched floor, Chance snoring on a folded towel, and I felt something I hadn't in months. Stillness. Not happiness. Not joy. But a clean, sharp kind of stillness that felt like clarity. Like starting again, not because I had to, but because I could. The envelope came 3 weeks after I blocked the last of their numbers. No return address, no warning. Just thick cream cardstock and elegant handwriting that couldn't have belonged to anyone else but my mother. She always believed presentation softened the truth. Inside was a glossy photo, Jasper and Marin, arm in arm, grinning beneath a white canopy on a boat. The sky was cerulean, the champagne glasses catching the sun like miniature prisms. My brother wore sunglasses and that self-satisfied smirk that used to charm investors. Marin wore white, of course. Her head tilted toward him, lips parted mid-laugh. Her hand rested lightly on his chest, over the heart I once thought was mine to trust. On the back, written in my mother's script, "You're still welcome. Don't let bitterness isolate you." Mom. I didn't rage, didn't throw the card across the room or shout profanities into the air. I took it into the kitchen, placed it in the sink, struck a match, and watched it curl and blacken until nothing remained but ash and a thin trail of smoke. The flame didn't sputter. It danced. Letting go of them wasn't an explosion. It was a quiet, deliberate burning of what no longer served me. I didn't need closure from them. I didn't want apologies muttered under half-hearted breaths. I wanted distance, silence, and maybe something like peace. That same day, I walked to the corner bookstore cafe. Not for a book, not for coffee. Just for somewhere that didn't carry ghosts. The place was tucked between a nail salon and a pawn shop, with chip paint on the windows and a flickering neon sign that read Chapter 1. It smelled like roasted beans and old pages, like something solid, something lived in. I stood in line behind a couple of college kids debating the morality of love triangles. The barista behind the counter moved with a kind of tired grace, hair pulled up into a messy bun, sleeves rolled past her elbows. She wore no name tag, just a pair of ink-stained fingers and a look in her eyes that said she saw more than most people ever did. When it was my turn, she tilted her head and said, "What's your favorite chapter in life so far?" Not, "What would you like?" Not, "How's your day?" I stared at her, momentarily disarmed. "Excuse me." She pointed at the sign behind her. I hadn't noticed it before, scrawled in chalk beneath the daily specials. "Tell me your favorite chapter. I'll pick your drink." I hesitated. My first instinct was to lie, to reach for something nostalgic, safe. But the truth slipped out before I could stop it. "The one I haven't written yet." She smiled, not wide, but warm. "Real. Then you get the begin again brew." She turned without another word, moving like someone who didn't need to fill silences with fluff. I watched her pour, steam, and stir. There was a rhythm to it, an honesty. When she handed me the cup, our fingers. Single moment than I had in years of forced family dinners and hollow marital rituals. I found a seat by the window, Chance curled up at my feet. He followed me everywhere now, always a few steps behind like he was making sure I didn't disappear. I sipped the coffee, nutty, strong, slightly sweet, and opened my notebook. The words came easier that day. Not perfect, not profound, but unfiltered. Honest. She came by with a cloth to wipe the next table and nodded at the notebook. You a writer? I shook my head. I used to be. Maybe I'm trying again. She didn't ask what I wrote. Didn't pry. Just said, we've all got pages we never read out loud. I looked up. What about you? I'm more of a coffee poet, she said. You know, bitter, hot, and rarely appreciated until I'm gone. We both laughed. That kind of laugh you feel in your ribs because it's been a while. I didn't ask her name. She didn't ask mine. We let it rest there, in that fragile space between strangers and something slightly more. When I left, she waved once, quick and casual, and I walked home with a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. That night, I lay on the floor with Chance, staring up at the ceiling, thinking about that question again, favorite chapter. I used to think it was the one where I got married, or when Jasper and I opened our second office. But those memories were infected now, swollen with betrayal and noise. I didn't want to live in them anymore. I wanted blank pages. Clean starts. I wanted to build a life that didn't revolve around proving my worth to people too blind to see it. The next morning, I boxed up the last of the wedding memorabilia. The invitation with gold script. The handwritten vows we never stuck to. The hotel receipts from the honeymoon. I didn't shred them. I didn't torch them. I simply packed them away and left the box at the back of the closet, where old lies went to die. I went back to the cafe every few days. I learned her name was Reese. She told me on the third visit, like it wasn't important, like she'd only remembered to say it because I kept showing up. She always asked something new. What do you miss most about being younger? Or what's the last thing you forgave yourself for? I never had neat answers, but she never needed them. She didn't know my last name. Didn't care. She didn't ask about Jasper or Marin or the fire I'd walked through. She just handed me cups with ridiculous names like The Plot Twist or Strong, but not Bitter, and let me sit. And maybe that's how healing started. Not with big revelations. Not with breakdowns or grand speeches. Just small moments. Quiet acknowledgments that you were still here. Still choosing to wake up. Still choosing to speak, even when your voice had once been used against you. The ash in the sink had washed away days ago, but something else remained, something sturdier than grief. I didn't have a name for it then. Maybe I still don't. But it felt a little like becoming. It started with a voicemail from HR. The kind that doesn't say much, but says enough. Polite tone, careful wording. Hi Daniel, we'd like to speak with you regarding a sensitive matter brought to our attention. Please call back at your earliest convenience. The voice belonged to Paula Matheson, head of compliance at the firm. She always sounded like she was apologizing for things she couldn't stop. I replayed the message twice. I hadn't worked at Ellison and Hale since I left Marin. Hadn't stepped foot in the building since Jasper's little gala slideshow outed my marriage as performance art. So what the hell did they want? I called back, of course. I wasn't afraid. I was curious. Suspicion already hummed beneath the surface like an old injury aching before a storm. Paula answered on the second ring. Daniel, thank you for returning the call. I'm afraid there have been some concerns raised about your recent conduct. That word, conduct, triggered something. I stood up, walked to the window of my loft, stared at the rusted rooftop across the alley. What conduct? I asked, voice flat. There have been reports of harassment directed at Jasper and Marin. I blinked. You're joking. I'm not, she replied. They've submitted documentation. Social media screenshots. Messages they say were sent from anonymous accounts. Threatening language. Hostile posts. We're required to investigate. I hadn't said their names aloud in months. I hadn't even posted anything on social media beyond one picture of Chance sleeping in a patch of sun. But I didn't tell her that. Not yet. What kind of messages? I asked. Things like, hope karma finds you soon. Your time is coming. And several vague allusions to violence. The posts were anonymous, but they believe the language is consistent with yours. My laugh was sharp, humorless. So they're filing claims against me for anonymous comments they can't prove I wrote? They're pursuing a formal review, Daniel. I shook my head. Of course they are. After we hung up, I opened the drawer of my desk, pulled out the leather journal where I tracked everything, every interaction, every date, every document I'd ever submitted to the firm or my attorney. I printed screenshots from my phone showing no activity, no accounts, no posts matching their claims. I sent a packet to Paula with a formal statement attached. I haven't spoken, posted, or interacted with either party since my divorce proceedings began. This is retaliation, plain and simple. I will not engage in their narrative. And then I logged off everything. Every platform. Deleted every app. Changed every password. That night, I sat in front of my laptop with Chance curled under the desk and started something new. A blog. No names, no photos, no vengeance. Just truth. My truth. I called it the quiet exit. I wrote about the betrayal in abstract. About the way silence could be weaponized. About starting over when the ground beneath you no longer felt like yours. I didn't out them. I didn't need to. I wasn't writing to punish, I was writing to breathe. The first post got 3 views. Then 20. Then 200. Someone shared it. Someone related. The next week, my inbox was full. Not with threats, but thanks. People wrote things like, I thought I was the only one. Or, you put words to something I've never said out loud. One woman wrote, my sister slept with my fiancé. Everyone told me to forgive her. Your story helped me understand why I didn't have to. I didn't reply to them all, but I read every single one. I let their words wash over the bitter residue Jasper and Marin had left behind. Because in those strangers, I found something my family never gave me, validation. Not pity, not spineless neutrality, just quiet acknowledgement. What happened to me wasn't normal, and walking away wasn't cruel. It was survival. The blog became a ritual. Once a week, I posted. Sometimes a reflection, sometimes a memory, sometimes just a single line. You are not obligated to bleed for people who stabbed you. That one went viral. I shut off my phone when it hit 50,000 shares. Reese found out about the blog by accident. We were walking past the town square one afternoon, sipping iced teas and debating whether pineapple belonged on pizza, when she said, So, when were you going to tell me you're low-key, internet famous? I froze. You saw it. She shrugged. Someone shared it on my feed. I didn't know it was you until the 3rd post. The writing felt like you. I waited for the judgment, for the concerned questions, for the suggestion that I was clinging too hard to pain. But instead, she smiled. It's honest. Brave, even. I didn't think it mattered anymore, I admitted. It matters to the people reading it. I looked at her, and there it was again, that ease in her eyes. That way she saw me without the years of family branding stamped across my shoulders. With Reese, I didn't have to be Daniel Hale, the son of founders, the brother of golden boys. I could just be the man who walked out and started writing again. Later that week, I got a message through the blog's contact form. No name, no subject line, just one sentence. You think you're clean, but you ruined everything first. I knew it was Marin, or Jasper, maybe both. I didn't reply. I didn't react. I just kept writing. And for the first time in my life, my name didn't feel like something I had to defend. I wasn't their version of me anymore. I wasn't the man expected to smile at family dinners while betrayal bloomed in the seat beside him. They could twist their narrative, file false claims, fabricate harassment. But I had the truth, and the whole world was starting to listen. It started with a ping, a harmless little sound from the banking app one barely used anymore. The shared account, left open out of some foolish belief that civility might survive divorce, wasn't even something I thought about. We'd agreed early on. It would hold any remaining joint transactions until everything was finalized. The balance had stayed the same for weeks. It was just under $20,000, money from tax returns, leftover savings, loose ends waiting for the legal stamp of closure. I hadn't touched it. Neither had she. Until she did. $19,700. Gone in one move. One clean withdrawal labeled Marin J.H. I stared at the screen for a full minute, the number etched in bright red like a flare to the face. My thumb hovered over the phone, as if it expected instinct to guide me, call her, rage at her, demand some answer. But nothing came. No fury. No scream. Just the clarity of finality. She was still taking. Even now. Even after all that was said, seen, filed, and finished. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I closed the app and placed the phone screen down on the counter like it was radiating heat. Instead, I called Lionel, my lawyer. The line clicked 3 times before his gravel voice answered. She touched the joint account. I said simply, How much? Everything. There was a long sigh. I warned you to freeze it. I know. I'll file a motion to finalize the divorce with prejudice first thing tomorrow. No more games. We're done playing polite. Good. And that was that. When I hung up, Chance wandered in from the corner, stretching his limbs like he'd been listening. He sat beside me, I searching my face. I gave him a nod, one of those small, human acknowledgments that we were still standing, still in this together. Later that day, I packed a simple dinner into a paper bag. 2 sandwiches, a thermos of ginger tea, a bag of those overpriced trail mix bites Reese liked. I texted her, up for a walk. She responded seconds later, meet me at Groveview in 20? I needed air. Movement. Something honest. The Groveview Trail was quiet at that hour, the trees tall and gentle in their age, their leaves whispering in the wind like a song for the broken. The gravel crunched under our feet as we walked in sync, saying nothing for the first mile. Reese held the thermos loosely in her hand, her other arm brushing mine now and then, soft and grounding. When we finally sat on the bench at the top of the overlook, the town spread out below us like a memory I hadn't lived in yet. I exhaled. She emptied the account, I said. Reese blinked once, slow. All of it. Everything but 300. I guess she thought that was generous. She didn't curse. Didn't gasp. She just looked out over the trees for a while, sipping tea. After a moment, I said, I thought I'd be angrier. And you're not. Oh, I am, I said. But it's quieter now. Like something inside me broke just enough to stop caring how she ends up. Reese leaned back, her hair catching the wind. Good. That word surprised me. Good. She turned toward me. Yeah, because that means you're still alive. People think anger is weakness or regression, but it's not. It's your body telling you it remembers how to fight. It's proof you haven't gone numb. I looked at her then, really looked. She didn't blink away, didn't soften it. She just let the truth hang in the air. You're not bitter, she added. You're healing. Bitterness is holding the knife. Healing is knowing where it cut you. I laughed, despite everything. You always talk like you've got a therapist living in your skull. She smirked. I did. Briefly. He was awful. But I learned a few things. We shared the sandwiches in silence, watching the dusk creep across the sky in slow violet waves. Chance curled at our feet like a living anchor, tail thumping against the bench leg now and then. You know what the worst part is? I said finally. What? She'll probably spend that money on something stupid. Designer shoes. A weekend spa retreat with Jasper. Or worse, something performative. A healing retreat in Tulum. And then she'll post about self-growth while stealing from the man she gutted. Reese didn't flinch. And none of that's your problem anymore. I know, I muttered. But it still lives in me. That urge to justify myself. To prove to someone, anyone, that I didn't deserve this. Reese reached over and touched my hand. Not dramatically. Not romantically. Just anchored it. You don't owe anyone an explanation for surviving betrayal, she said. You walked away with your integrity. They'll spend the rest of their lives trying to convince themselves that matters less than what they took. That line, what they took, sat with me long after the walk ended. That night, back at the loft, I showered with the water hotter than usual. Not to cleanse anything physical, but to remind myself I could choose comfort again. I dressed in a soft shirt that Marin always said was too casual and let Chance crawl up onto the mattress I'd finally upgraded from the floor. My laptop screen glowed with the cursor blinking at the top of a blank post. I didn't write about the money, or the theft, or even her. I wrote about freedom. The kind that doesn't come with closure, or clean lines, or applause. The kind you carve out with silence, one hard decision at a time. And at the bottom, in bold letters, I typed, You are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to keep walking. It started with a letter postmarked in my father's handwriting. Not typed, not a cold legal envelope. A real letter, like we used to send to summer camp when we were boys and phones weren't yet lifelines. I found it on my doorstep one morning tucked between a package of new pens and the usual junk mail. I knew that cursive the moment I saw it. Tight, deliberate strokes, slightly slanted to the right. My first thought wasn't hope. It was strategy, because I knew the game my family played. Wait until the flames die down, then send a message like it hadn't been them holding the matches. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the counter beside Chance's bowl and let it sit there while I boiled water for tea. But it pulsed like a heartbeat in the corner of my vision, loud without making a sound. Eventually, I sat at my desk, slit the envelope open with a box cutter, and unfolded the single sheet inside. Your brother's not well. Marin is leaving him. He's spiraling. He needs you. So do we. Dad. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just a summons wrapped in guilt. That was always his style, emotional accounting, paid in silent debts. We raised you. We fed you. Now be loyal. No matter how wrong we were. No matter how much we let slide. The letter smelled faintly of cologne and ash. I folded it back up without replying. But the messages didn't stop there. Voicemails began flooding in. First, my father's voice, stiff and businesslike. Just call us. This is family, Daniel. Don't turn your back on that. Then my mother, honey, we're not choosing sides. We're just asking you to have compassion. You were always the one with the heart. She made it sound like a compliment. It wasn't. It was an expectation. Be soft, be forgiving, be the one who makes peace, even when they're the ones who break it. Emails followed. Some short, some desperate, some dressed up in nostalgia. Remember the beach trip? How you and Jasper built that awful sandcastle and swore it was a fortress. Others were pure manipulation. He's drinking too much. He won't talk to anyone but you. We're scared. I didn't respond to any of it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was done performing empathy for people who never earned it. I didn't need to be the bigger person. I just needed to be free. One night, after the 6th voicemail of the day, I sat on the rooftop with Reese. She'd brought over a bottle of red wine that tasted like pepper and memory. We sat on a blanket surrounded by string lights I'd finally put up, tiny orbs glowing like fireflies caught mid-thought. She handed me a glass and said, "You look like someone trying not to scream." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. They want me to come back. To fix him. Again. Reese didn't blink. You going to? No. She took a sip of wine and nodded, like that was the only answer worth saying out loud. They keep saying he's not well. That Marin's left. That he's falling apart. I paused. And a small part of me, the part they built, still wonders if it's wrong to ignore it. She didn't interrupt. She never did. But then I remember, I continued, how they didn't defend me when he was crawling into bed with my wife. How they told me to talk it out. How they said family is complicated and made me feel like setting boundaries was betrayal. Reese set down her glass and looked at me directly. They don't miss you, Daniel. They miss what you used to give. Your silence. Your loyalty. Your willingness to bleed for their comfort. That sentence landed with precision. Not cruel. Just accurate. I nodded slowly, the words sitting heavy but true. They missed the version of me that didn't say no. Exactly. A breeze passed over us, and Chance stirred from his nap on the blanket, stretching with a low groan. Reese scratched behind his ears. You know, I said, it's funny. They keep asking what happened to the old Daniel. But they're the reason he's gone. Reese raised her glass. Then here's to the man who didn't die. He just stopped performing. We clinked glasses. No applause. No fanfare. Just that stillness I'd started to crave more than justice. Peace wasn't a destination. It was a decision I kept making every time I didn't pick up the phone. Every time I let their messages go unanswered. I still checked the inbox from time to time. Call it habit, curiosity, or some last ember of the old Daniel who thought maybe someone would finally say, I'm sorry. But they never did. Only justifications. Please dressed in nostalgia. Promises of, we can be whole again. Like they didn't know they were the ones who shattered it in the first place. After Reese left that night, I walked back into the loft and sat at my desk. I didn't write a blog post. I didn't rant. I just pulled out my journal and wrote one sentence. You are not selfish for refusing to rebuild bridges you didn't burn. I closed the book and exhaled. Outside, the night carried on. Cars in the distance, a faint siren, someone laughing 2 streets over. And for once, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I hadn't disappeared. I just finally stopped answering to people who never truly saw me. The envelope was thick and clinical, stamped with the logo of St. Alder's Medical Center and addressed to me, full name, correct apartment number, no mistake. I opened it at the kitchen counter, halfway through microwaving leftovers, Chance nosing around my feet hoping for dropped chicken. At fur. Mr. Daniel Hale, your genetic profile indicates a potential donor match for Mr. Jasper Hale, currently undergoing treatment for renal failure. I stopped reading. Renal failure. My brother. The man who'd stolen my wife, lied to my face, buried my name under whispers and legal accusations, was now lying in a hospital bed, kidneys failing, hoping for a miracle. And apparently, I was it. The microwaves beeped. I didn't move. Just stared at the words like they had come from a play I didn't audition for. I turned the page. There was a waiver. A release form. Boxes to check, terms to consider. Attached to it, a handwritten note. Not from a doctor, but from my mother. Folded in perfect thirds. She had always been neat, even in chaos. This isn't about the past. It's about what's right. Please, Daniel. Don't let him die. Mom. No apology. No reflection. Just expectation. As if the blood running through my veins made me theirs again. As if biology should override betrayal. I left the food in the microwave and walked to the window. Outside, the streetlight flickered softly, casting long shadows across the sidewalk where a couple walked hand in hand, laughing quietly. Normal life. Simple life. The kind I'd been building, slowly, carefully, brick by brick since everything collapsed. I thought about Jasper in a hospital gown. Pale. Weak. Scared. Maybe. I imagined him with the same expression he wore the day I caught the footage, the look of someone who knew he didn't deserve to get away with it but would still try anyway. I thought about how he never once called to apologize. Never wrote. Just accusations, lawsuits, cowardice behind my back. And now he needed something from me. I didn't reply to the letter that night. I didn't shred it, either. I slid it under a pile of old bills and went out for a walk with Chance, needing distance from my own name. The next morning, I called the hospital. Not my parents. Not Jasper. A woman named Angela from the transplant coordinator team picked up. Polite voice. Professional. This is Daniel Hale, I said. You contacted me about a donor match. Yes, she said, hopeful. We were informed you're a primary sibling. Thank you for calling. I'm not calling to accept. A pause. Sir, may I ask why? I kept my voice level. Because I'm not obligated to save someone who tried to ruin me. There was another pause. Not long. Just heavy. I understand, she finally said, tone softer. We just asked that you sign the refusal form, officially. I'll do it in person, I said. I want it on record. St. Alders was across town, near the water. I drove in silence, watching the city pass by like a documentary of someone else's life. I hadn't been to that side of the city since before the divorce. Marin used to love the bistro by the pier. She'd wear long scarves and talk about Paris while sipping overpriced cappuccinos. Funny how I still remembered that. The hospital lobby was all polished tile and artificial calm. Pastel walls. Soothing art. The illusion of safety. Angela met me near the reception desk, holding a clipboard. If you're sure, she began. I'm sure. She led me to a side room. Private. Quiet. I read the refusal form. It didn't take long. I checked the boxes, signed the line, dated it. My pen moved without hesitation. As I handed the clipboard back, Angela hesitated. He's not well, she said softly. I know. His family says. They're not my family, I said, calmly. Another silence. Then she nodded, collected the form, and left me alone. But I wasn't done. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the ICU floor. I didn't ask permission. I didn't need to. I knew my way around hospitals. I'd volunteered at one in college. I knew the signs, the codes, the rhythm of places filled with quiet desperation. Room 416. I knew it before I saw it. A nurse glanced at me as I stood outside the door, but didn't stop me. Inside, Jasper looked smaller than I remembered. For lines, pale skin, the beeping of monitors keeping time. He was awake, barely. Eyes half-lidded, drifting. He blinked when he saw me, like he wasn't sure I was real. I stepped closer. So this is what it takes to see you face to face. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out at first. Then a dry rasp. Danda. No, I cut in. You don't get to say my name. His eyes glistened. Whether from pain or shame, I couldn't tell. You took my wife, I said quietly. You took my peace. My name. And you watched me unravel and said nothing. I was wrong. You were a coward. He didn't argue. Maybe because he couldn't. Maybe because he knew. She left you. I asked. He nodded. I almost smiled. Not out of joy. Out of clarity. Out of how predictable it all was. Well, I said, now you know what it feels like. His breathing hitched. Whether it was guilt or failing organs, I didn't care. I came here, I said, to tell you in person. I'm not saving you. His face crumpled. Please. This isn't revenge, I said. It's boundaries. And for once, I'm keeping mine. I walked out without looking back. In the elevator, I finally exhaled. Back at home, I opened my notebook and wrote one line. Mercy isn't owed to those who never showed it. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, sat beside Chance, and watched the sun slide down behind the Briarton rooftops, more at peace than I'd ever been. It was a sound I hadn't heard in months, my old ring-tone, the one I'd forgotten I never changed on my backup phone. I kept that phone powered down most of the time, tucked in a drawer beside expired chargers and a pair of noise-canceling headphones I never used. But that night, for reasons I can't explain, I turned it on. Maybe I was searching for a photo I thought I'd saved there. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe part of me still wanted proof that silence had been earned. The screen blinked on, and almost immediately, the notifications hit like hail, alerts tumbling in rapid succession, one after another until they blurred together. 103 missed calls, all from one number. Jasper. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then I saw the voicemails, 14, and messages, dozens, all waiting in that tiny inbox like something rotting behind a sealed door. I didn't open them. Not right away. I stood in the middle of the loft, the glow of the screen painting my face in cold blue light, while Chance whined from the other room like he could feel the static climbing up my spine. I sat down at my desk, turned the phone face down, and stared at the window for a full minute. Outside, it had started to rain, a slow, steady rhythm against the glass that usually brought me comfort. Not tonight. Tonight it felt like background noise for something crawling back from the grave. I opened the first voicemail. Daniel, please, it's me. I know I don't have a right to ask, but she's gone. Marin left. Just walked out, no warning, no goodbye. I think I ruined everything. The voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying. Or drinking. Or both. I opened the second one. You were right. About everything. She never loved me. Not really. She used me to make herself feel powerful. I see that now. The third was shorter. I don't know who I am anymore. By the fifth, I stopped listening. The messages weren't for me. They were for the version of me he remembered, before the affair, before the lies, before the silence. The brother who used to patch holes, smooth over family disasters, fix things. That man was gone. The phone buzzed again in my hand. Another call, live this time. I declined it without thinking. Reese walked in a few minutes later, barefoot, wearing a hoodie that didn't belong to her. It was mine, faded black with a cracked logo from some retreat I never went to. She took one look at my face and tilted her head. What happened? I held up the phone. Jasper found a way through. She didn't ask if I answered. She didn't ask if I planned to. Instead, she walked over, picked up the phone gently, powered it down, and placed it in the drawer where it belonged. Let the ghosts talk to themselves. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. She poured 2 mugs of coffee, one for me, one for her, and sat beside me on the couch, pulling her knees up like she always did when something was too big to name. He said she left him. I murmured. She probably did. He sounded broken. Reese didn't blink. And I turned to her. And I guess some part of me thought I'd feel better hearing that. But I don't. I just feel nothing. She smiled, soft and knowing. That's called healing. We sipped our coffee in silence. I thought back to the last time I saw Jasper, his hollowed-out face in the hospital, the desperation in his voice when he whispered please like a child begging the night not to come. That man was a stranger to me now. Not because he was broken, but because I finally understood. He didn't miss me. He missed the ease of my forgiveness, the utility of my loyalty, the reliability of my silence. I used to think forgiveness was about letting go, but sometimes it's about holding firm, about saying, you don't get to be the villain and still ask for the hero to show up. The next morning, I walked to the cafe to clear my head. Reese wasn't working, her day off, but the girl at the counter knew my order by now. Stillness blend, 2 sugars, no room. I sat by the window, notebook open, pen in hand. On a blank page, I wrote a list. At the top, things I no longer owe. 1. An explanation. 2. A response. 3. My peace. 4. My body as a sacrifice. 5. My voice as their shield. 6. My loyalty to people who treat betrayal as temporary. 7. The version of me that said yes to everything out of fear of abandonment. I closed the book. That was enough. Back at the loft, I found Chance watching birds through the window, his tail wagging softly. I sat beside him, laid a hand on his back. You ever wish you could talk? I asked him. He yawned in response. I smiled. Yeah, me neither. Later that night, I deleted every voicemail without listening to the rest. I didn't do it in anger. I did it in relief. Each swipe felt like cutting a tether from something I hadn't realized was still weighing me down. When Reese came over again, she found me on the floor, back against the couch, Chance curled into my side like a punctuation mark. Bad night? She asked. Not anymore. She sat next to me, her shoulder brushing mine. You sure? I nodded. Yeah. I think I'm finally done answering calls meant for the man I used to be. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Then maybe it's time you block the number completely. I did it before she even stood up. And for the first time since the night of that cursed slideshow, I went to sleep without expecting ghosts to claw their way into my dreams. It was near the bottom of the storage box, beneath the winter scarves I never wore anymore and a bundle of tax documents I'd already refiled under a new accountant. The frame was heavier than I remembered. Thick glass, gold corners. Still pristine. No dust. No scratches. Like it hadn't aged a day, even though the marriage it celebrated had already turned to rot in memory. I didn't open the frame. I didn't need to. I knew the photo inside by heart. Our wedding day. Marin in her lace gown, face turned to the sun, the wind catching her veil in just the right way. Me in a tailored navy suit, holding her close, smiling like a man who believed he'd found home. It wasn't rage I felt as I looked at it. Not even sadness. Just distance. Like I was staring at someone else's life entirely, a character I'd once played in a story I no longer wanted to finish. I didn't smash the frame. Didn't throw it. That would have made it feel important again, and it wasn't. It was just a thing. A relic. And relics belong to the past, not to the people trying to move forward. So I slid it back into the box, carried it to the car, and drove to Goodwill. The guy behind the counter didn't even look twice when I set it down. Just took it, tagged it, and set it in a bin full of forgotten trophies and novelty mugs. I didn't feel lighter. Not exactly. But something shifted. Like letting go of the frame loosened whatever tethers had been left clinging to me. That evening, I picked up a few groceries. Grapes, rosemary bread, some fig jam Reese liked even though she always insisted she hated pretentious food. Then I stopped at the hardware store and bought a string of fairy lights on impulse. The kind with warm bulbs and wire that bends around tree branches or porch railings. When I got back to the loft, Reese was already there, barefoot and sitting cross-legged on the blanket we'd thrown over the rooftop. She looked up from her book as I emerged, her face softening in that way it did only when she was completely unguarded. No makeup, no small talk, just eyes that didn't ask me to be anything but whole. I held up the lights like a prize. We're getting cheesy tonight. She grinned. About time. I thought I was going to have to stage an intervention. We strung them along the balcony railing, then around the small potted tree she'd insisted on dragging up last month. When we plugged them in, the light soaked the rooftop in gold, gentle, warm, and perfect. Like the inside of a storybook nobody bothered to edit. We ate on the blanket. Just bread and fruit, and 2 glasses of wine that didn't match because neither of us cared enough to buy proper sets. Chance lay between us like a satisfied chaperone, occasionally nudging a grape with his nose, confused why it wasn't meat. No occasion. No anniversary. No birthday. Just stillness. At one point, Reese raised her glass and said, "To choosing yourself." I clinked mine against hers and whispered back, "To never begging someone to see my worth again." We didn't toast loud. We didn't need to. Some truths don't require a stage. The stars above Briarton weren't bright like the countryside, but they showed up anyway. Faint. Scattered. Like they were trying. I leaned back on my elbows and stared up. "It's strange," I said. "How quiet it all got. After the noise, the war, the burning, this is what it came down to." Reese pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms around them. Stillness is underrated. Everyone wants fireworks. But sometimes peace is just not needing to brace anymore. I turned to her. "Do you think I should have burned it?" "The photo frame." She shook her head. "No. Giving it away is louder. It says, this doesn't own me anymore. That's real power." I didn't say anything for a while. I just let that idea settle. I'd spent so long reacting, defending, explaining, rebuilding, trying to reclaim my name from the mouths of people who never deserved to say it. But giving away the frame without ceremony wasn't weakness. It was reclamation. I'd been holding pieces of that day like they had some control over my future. But they didn't. They were static images in a life that kept moving. And I had finally caught up. Later, as we packed up, Reese brushed her hand against mine, fingers lingering. "You know," she said, "you never told me what you'd do if they called again. If Jasper or your parents showed up at your door." I looked at her. Not coldly. Not with pain. Just level. "They won't. But if they did?" I thought for a second. "I wouldn't open it." She smiled. "Good. Not because I'm angry," I added, "but because they're not owed access to who I am now." She leaned in, resting her head lightly on my shoulder. Exactly. Inside, I took down the last picture from the wall. It had nothing to do with Marin or Jasper. It was just an old watercolor I bought during a trip with my parents years ago, back when things hadn't yet rotted. I set it aside for storage. I didn't need it glaring at me anymore. In its place, I hung a photo Reese had taken, a black and white shot of Chance sleeping on my manuscript notes, his paw smudging the ink. It was real. It was now. And it made me laugh every time I looked at it. I sat at my desk, cracked my knuckles, opened a fresh document. This wasn't about closure anymore. It was about authorship, not of a blog, not of some carefully curated persona, but of my life, my rules, my pace. That night, I received one more message on my blog's contact form. It wasn't from Marin or Jasper. It was from someone anonymous. All it said was, "How did you know when it was finally over?" I stared at the question for a long time, then typed, "It's over when you no longer feel the need to check if it could have been different." And I didn't feel the need anymore. Not to fix it, not to revisit it, not to wait by the phone, not to keep a single piece of what betrayed me, even if it wore a familiar face. That was the final freedom, not revenge, not validation, but the quiet permission to simply move on. The next morning, I took Chance out early. The sky was pale lavender, clouds stretched like cotton across the horizon. He trotted ahead with a new energy, tail swaying like a metronome. I breathed in deep, let it fill every corner of me. I wasn't waiting for the next message, the next apology, the next storm. I wasn't bracing anymore. I was living, and no one else held the pen.